Hi, everybody, and welcome aboard to Local Matters. You know, Americans are living longer, healthier lives. For instance, there's this idea that the 60s are the new 50s, and the 50s are the new 40s, and the 40s are the new 30s. Well, you get the idea. But despite this ideological concept of aging, research shows at least 80% of us will need some form of long-term care someday. And 70% of that care will be done by family members. And guess what, guys? Family members, they don't get paid. So find out how and what you can do today to help curb costs for caregivers and for loved ones. You're watching Local Matters.
Yes. Let me see you move.
Love never felt so good. Can't I die if it never could? Not like you. Oh.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Local Matters. You know, it really is great that overall Americans are living healthier lives, but according to research, at least 80% of us will need some form of long-term care someday, and it will not be done in a nursing home, but rather it's either going to be done in our own home or a home of a loved one. So joining me today to provide some tips on this complex subject matter, especially with the state of health care plans today, is Local Matters legal consultant, attorney Bruce Adams. Welcome back to Local Matters.
Thank you, Dottie. It's good to be back.
All right, it's good. You know, you've been away for a few weeks, so it's always good to see you.
Thank you.
You know, I wanted to talk about this because, you know, right now we're still unsure really what's going to be going on or what's going to happen with our health care plans.
Right.
But one thing for sure, we are living longer lives. A 50-year-old woman today is not the 50-year-old of our grandmother, for sure.
That's true.
For sure. And so because of that, we've got to be really cognizant about how do we spend our money and how we spend our money. And Bruce, I understand that you actually, now this is outside of your professional life, but on a personal side, you saw an aunt, you helped take care of an aunt, and tell me about that story.
Okay.
I really found that interesting.
That was before I moved into this area of practice and made a point of getting the training to do long-term care and elder law planning work. I was doing a general law practice back in those days, and my mother's older sister was widowed with no children of her own.
Okay.
And she lived in a little town called West Point, Georgia.
Okay.
And
That's where believe it or not, that's where my mom's from.
Okay,
Yeah,
all right,
West
right
Point,
across the
Georgia,
line from
yeah.
Lynette, Alabama. All right. Well, she was very independent sort, but as she got older, she could no longer care for herself at home, living by herself.
Okay.
She went to assisted living, but as she aged some more, they said they could not provide the level of care she needed. We had to put her in the Lanier Nursing Home.
Okay.
Now, she had been a fairly good little businesswoman. She'd had a dress shop. She sold that. She bought some rental property. She had saved, had
was
CDs.
doing all the right things.
All the right
Yeah.
things, and she did not have a huge estate. But she had, and I mean, I don't mind going ahead and sharing it, she had approximately $400,000 in assets.
Well, that's huge to me.
Okay,
Sounds
well-
pretty good to me to have $400,000.
Well,
Yeah.
for long-term care, it wasn't sufficient.
Yeah,
When she
yeah.
ended up in the nursing home, it was running between, in those days, and this has been back about 10, 11 years ago, it was running about $5,500 a month.
For her to be in that nursing home.
Right, and that didn't include incidentals. So, you know, you were looking at close to $70,000, $65,000 to $70,000 a year. She lived in that nursing home until she was 94 years old when she passed away.
So she went in, she was in her 80s.
She was in her 80s and she lived there until she was 94.
Wow.
And it went through every last penny. She was completely broke. I had made an application for Medicaid benefits. At that time, we'd sold her properties, her CDs, her stocks, her bonds, her home.
Wow.
There was absolutely nothing left because she simply outlived her money.
She outlived her money. And most people are not fortunate enough to have $400,000 to even run through, if you will.
Yeah.
So let's bring up the tips right now. Let's just talk about what can people start, because most people, average people, are not just sitting around with $400,000, just kind of sitting there. What do people really need to start doing right now? Let's just say you don't really have anything. You really haven't prepared. And that really is, according to research, that's over half of Americans who are just not ready for retirement, and they're certainly not ready, having prepared themselves for long-term care.
Well, I think for a lot of people, the cost of long-term care is the first shock. They don't realize how much it costs to provide this care or to get this care. So the first thing I would say is that people have a tendency to think, yes, I need to get around to doing this, and I will, and they put it off and they put it off until suddenly one day there's a family crisis. And at that point, it's very difficult to do the planning. I always say plan when you're vertical, not when you're horizontal.
Right, because this is too late, yes.
It's too late. So the first and the best tip I can give is to have that family discussion and sit down then with your financial advisor and your lawyer and plan in advance when you can. If you don't think you have any immediate need, that's wonderful. What you're doing is you're putting a plan in place so when and if that day arrives, you've got everything in place to protect yourself, your family, and your finances.
And that's the part we had up there too on the full screen where it says do your homework. That's kind of what that's in that area right there. If we have on the full screen is back up there. That's the do your homework part. Start communicating now.
Yes.
You mentioned to me is so much more important now than it was even 30, 40 years ago because people are they don't live, years ago people really lived in the same area. I mean, you may have lived maybe 5, 6, 7 miles away from mom and dad, but now that's not the case.
Families are scattered all over the place now. It's not unusual to have parents here. One child may live in the Carolinas, another one may live out in Texas somewhere. People are much more mobile now. So that core of close family members that are available to assist is not always available to everyone.
That's right. Because people, again, are not living in the same proximity as they did in years past. So even with my own situation, I didn't think that I was going to be moving back to Anniston. This is how I felt a few years ago. My mom and dad both are still living, and so I'm here. My sister is here, and then I have an older brother that's also here. So we're in pretty good shape in terms of proximity. We could help out, and that's where I really want to lead to now. So we could help mom and dad out should they ever become in a state where they need some form of long-term care, because again, I want people to understand that when we say long-term care, it's not necessarily you're going straight into the nursing home.
No, it's almost a step process, and there's different levels of long-term care. As long as possible, people want to maintain their independence and remain in their home. And in-home care, of course, is the first choice that most people want. If you don't have family members available who are able to do that, or even if you have family members that can help some, but they have jobs and responsibilities, they can't be there as much as needed, then you have to hire in-home health. And home health care companies provide a wonderful service, but it has to be paid for.
Has to be paid for. And we're going to get back to that in a minute too, because because it has to be paid for. But how do you begin to pay for it if you haven't, if you didn't even begin to prepare for it? How do you begin to pay for it?
There's 3 ways you can pay for long-term care. And one is that you pay, which is what the you pay plan, as I call it, is what my aunt did.
Which your aunt did.
And basically you pay and pay and pay until you meet Medicaid requirements for assistance, which is no more than $2,000 in assets. So you virtually have to be destitute.
Okay. So let's go back up. I want to bring, I had a full screen I created too, because I want to go back. You mentioned being destitute, and then you mentioned Medicaid. So let's go back, because I have a full screen created that I want to take a look at. These are some of when we begin to talk about long-term care, who's picking up the tab? You've moved mom, dad in with you. They're not totally, they still have a great form of independence, if you will, but you still need some help to take care of them. These are some ways, the Medicare, Medicaid,
they are,
and trust fund retirement.
And it depends on the level of care that's required. I said there were 3 ways: you pay, insurance pays, or the government pays. Well, let's start with Medicare.
Well, we want to start that when we come right back, Bruce. We've got to go to break. When we come back, I want us to talk now. Let's just look at all of those options. Who's going to pick up the tab? You've got to take mommy in. You've got to take daddy in, or sister or brother or whomever. We're gonna look at some of those ways of how. Who can help you pick up the tab? We'll be right back with more Local Matters. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Local Matters. I'm Dottie Rimsey, and I'm sitting here and I'm joined with Local Matters legal consultant, Mr. Bruce Adams. And so we've been talking, I want to just go right into it. Before we went to break, we were talking about ways that you could really, ways that to pay for care, for long-term care.
Right.
I mean, if you're just joining us, we were talking about earlier in the segment, we were talking about your aunt. She had $400,000 that she had that she was able to utilize to take care of herself in a nursing home. Most people don't have $400,000, but the sad part is that she had the $400,000, and then when she died,
She was broke.
she was destitute.
Totally broke.
And that shouldn't have happened. But you weren't at that time.
I wasn't doing this type of work.
You wasn't
at that
doing
time.
this type of work.
And she had been a very independent soul, and so she kept her affairs private, and she had been a widow for about 20 years. So, you know, she was one of those folks that she wasn't going to share much information
Yeah, she
with
wasn't
you
going to
about
allow,
her.
even if you, I mean, she might have had you been doing this type of work, but the fact that you weren't,
Right.
now I'm almost pretty sure too, she probably was like, nope, you're not going to get in my business.
No,
Not
that
going to
was
tell
one
me
of the-
what to do with my money.
That was one of the first introductions I had to how devastating the cost of long-term care can be, and was one of the things that moved me toward an interest in this area.
Exactly. I was going to say that probably really is what helped to guide you in this area when you saw what happened to your aunt, a woman of means, and then to die with nothing because she went through that money in order to live, and she lived a long time.
Yeah.
And so we've been talking too, if you're just joining us, you know, we're living longer lives, and you really can at some point outlive your money. What do?
That money only lasted 5.5 years in a nursing home.
And she lived in a nursing home how long?
6.5.
6.5. So she outlived her money by a year and a half. I want to bring that full screen back out because
Okay.
here's the thing. There are many, many options to help people to pay for long-term care. And again, we're stressing, you're not in a nursing home. You may be living with an aunt, an uncle, your son, your daughter, a niece, nephew, and you have, let's say you did do everything right. You've got some money stashed to the side for your long-term care, but you also want to be able to utilize some Medicare and some Medicaid if you can.
Okay.
You have to know what you're doing in order to be able to do this.
Yeah, let me run down the list. Medicare, first of
okay.
all. People get Medicare and Medicaid confused all the time.
Okay.
Medicare has a very, very limited benefit for long-term care. They pay, after the first 3 days in a nursing home, they will pay 80% up to day 30 and 20% up to day 100, and that's all the benefit Medicare has.
That's it for Medicare.
That's it for Medicare. Medicaid is a federal program administered by the states, and that is the program that will have continuing ongoing care for people who meet the criteria.
Meet the criteria.
Now, the criteria is stringent. You can't have but $2,000 in assets.
Yeah, I was getting ready to say your aunt wouldn't have qualified with $400,000 sitting around.
She did at the end of 5.5 years.
Right, yeah.
So we had to put in that application for the last year. But until she was under $2,000, she did not qualify. And that's in any 30-day calendar period. So if you have $2,100 on January 30th, or excuse me, on February 1st, you're not going to be eligible anytime that month.
Okay.
So you go into the next month. They look at a snapshot.
Okay.
But Medicaid is something that you can prepare in advance so that you will qualify for that assistance and can preserve assets for your heirs.
Okay.
But to do that, we skip down to pre-planning and trust fund.
Okay.
You pre-plan to create a trust structure that holds your assets,
Okay.
so that when and if you have to go into a nursing home, then you will, as an individual, financially qualify for that assistance and not have to devastate your entire.
Wow. So here's the thing, and then so let's talk about retirement too.
Okay.
So if you have a retirement money stashed away in your retirement fund, you might want to move that over into a trust fund as well.
No. Nope.
No.
Nope. But
Nope,
there's a
okay.
good option for that.
Okay.
And the reason I say that is that has traditionally been a difficult issue because Alabama Medicaid counts retirement funds, 401ks, IRAs, that type of thing,
Okay.
as an available resource that you have to use before you will be eligible for their assistance.
Wow, I didn't go there. Let me say,
So
say
it's
that
not
again.
exempt.
So you can't. So the retirement fund.
Not exempt.
Not
It's an
exempt.
available resource for Alabama Medicaid's purposes.
Okay.
But if you move that money into the trust,
Into a trust. There
now
we go.
you've triggered the tax liability on all that money because it's all tax deferred money. So
Okay.
people had a dilemma about that.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, that was always the big issue of what am I going to do with this large retirement account I built up at the depot or wherever, because I don't want to pay the taxes. But if you withdrew it to pay for long-term care, you had to take out enough to pay the tax and net what you needed, so you burned through it even faster.
So you burn through it faster.
That's right. Under the Pension Protection Act, which is a federal act that was passed,
Okay.
there's some new products that have come out from the insurance industry called Asset Care.
And you were working very closely with these insurance companies as well, right?
Yes,
But- okay.
yes, we do. And Asset Care has been a wonderful new product. You can move these retirement funds tax-free. There's no tax penalty.
Wow.
Put them in an Asset Care plan that will leverage, so anywhere from $1.50, 1.5 to 1, up to 3 to 1, depending on the plan you enter, in terms of the amount of money they will pay out maximum for long-term care. If you don't need it for long-term care, then you don't lose it. It can be inherited by your family.
Okay, I want to stop you right there because I want us to, we got to go to break. They're in my ear, but I want to come back because a lot of this is knowing how to move your money. And you need help unless you are very, unless you are just, smart and you know all about, how to move your money into trust funds. This is very interesting. So we're going to talk more about how to move what you have out there so you won't have to be taxed on it. You won't have to spend it. So we're going to go to break, but we'll be right back. Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Local Matters, where living local never felt so darn good. I'm Dottie Rimsey. And if you're just joining me, we have been sitting here talking. That's attorney Bruce Adams and myself. He is Local Matters legal consultant. And we've been talking all about long-term care. It's no secret that we are living longer, most of the time healthier lives, but that can be an upside or a downside if you're living longer. Because according to research, the longer you live, that you're going to need some form of long-term care. And that makes sense. And it's not necessarily that you need to go into a nursing home, but you may need just help with cooking, getting dressed, cleaning your house, these type of things with long-term care. So we've been talking, if you're joining us, we've been talking about this has a lot to do with all of the different options that are out here to help you pay for this stuff, because who's going to pick up the tab? Most people haven't prepared. So we've been talking about the various options. And before we went to break, we were talking about a trust fund is a really great option to, as Bruce says, put some money into.
No, I didn't use the word hide.
Protect. I'm saying high. No,
Yes.
protect.
Yes.
Protect your money.
Right. What you can do, you create a trust, and you fund it with the assets you choose to put in there. And then those assets, once we get them inside that trust, they will be sheltered or protected from creditors.
Okay.
Now, when it comes to time for you to go in the nursing home if you need to, then those assets are not in your name to be counted as a resource available to you.
Okay. Here's another thing. I'm thinking about an average. When someone's setting up a trust fund, what's an average dollar amount? When you see people, when people come and talk to you all the time, they might come in and say, I have $30,000 that I want to put in a trust fund. Is it lower than, what's the minimum that you're going to want to put into a trust?
It varies, and it depends on what they own. A lot of people, what they will create the trust for and put in is land. It's not cash.
Okay.
They'll want to protect the home place for the children, or they may have, in addition to the home, they may have some timberland.
Okay.
And they may want to hang on to that for their kids, so they'll move the land into the trust. So it's
Vacation
not always
homes, different
vacation
homes,
that
things,
type of thing.
And of course the home house, they'll put that in the trust fund.
Yes, and that's good because in the grantor trust we use, and I don't want to get too technical, but
Right.
if they just give it to the children now, The children get what's known as their basis in the property, which is
Okay.
what they invested to get it.
Okay.
If they then resell it, they're going to pay on the gain as it's appreciated over the years.
Okay.
If it's in the trust and they inherit it through the trust, their basis becomes the fair market value when they get it. So they don't
gotcha.
pay tax on all that appreciation. So there's some advantages to putting the land in
See, this
a
is why it's
trust.
going to be so important to just to come and call Adams Miller Law to come and sit down, because a lot of this is just really just sitting down talking to find out what the various options are as you prepare to you're retiring and you realize that, okay, I've got this, I've got that, but I want to make sure it's protected. I want to make sure I'm okay with what I'm doing. So let's say you moved in with your daughter and now you've got money. You realize you're gonna have to put some money in a trust fund. Can you? I know that you can. I'm not sure if is there a specific name where you can split the monies and put part of it in the checking account?
Well, you're going to make a decision. It's called funding the trust.
Okay.
Once you create the trust, it's empty until you put assets in it. So you will select the assets to transfer and retitle as being owned by the trust, and choose the ones that you want to leave out of the trust.
Okay.
Obviously, you don't want to lock up 100% of your assets in there. I call it mad money. Everybody wants to leave some mad money out.
Right.
But you can transfer, you can deed real estate in, you can open bank accounts within the trust, stock funds in the trust, but you can say, I want to keep this much out.
Here's the thing too, and this actually happened to a friend of mine. She's older than I am, and her son did very well in life and financially, and he gave her a huge, beautiful gift. I think it was over, I don't know, $100,000, and because he did that, she wasn't able to apply or to utilize Medicaid and Medicare because of that. That would have been a great plan for her to do then, was to put that money into a trust fund.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it would have been. I tell you, that happens a lot where people have beneficiary designations on their assets. So, you know, let me use the example of a couple that has a car accident.
Right.
One's killed, the other is seriously injured and goes into the nursing home. Well, if the life insurance for the one that's killed pays to that individual, that resource is now in their name, and they're going to have to utilize it before they're eligible for any public assistance with the cost of that care.
Wow.
So
wow. But
retitling those or changing those beneficiary designations to the trust can be
Yes.
an important part of planning.
So, and you do this all the time. You're talking with people. I know that you have seminars that you host. You and of course Bill, you host seminars all of the time throughout the entire Northeast region. You have some coming up in June, or you're not quite sure where they are though right now. I'm not sure.
I'm not sure the dates and
Yeah.
locations in June. We do them at 3 a month. And the
Okay.
last one this month will be next week in the Gadsden-Attala area. Well, not next week, this week.
Yeah.
Wednesday of this week in the
Yeah.
Gadsden-Attala area. And then they can go to our website or call our office, and we can give them the alternative locations and dates, and they
Okay.
can pick what's convenient for them. We just ask that you call and register first, because that allows us then to know when we've got a full room and need to move people to the next workshop.
Right. And so when you have the workshops, of course, people, is it really a long, I mean, it's only like, how long is it going to be if people?
Depending on the number of questions,
Okay.
it's going to be between an hour and a half and 2 hours. You've really got me hitting I'm skimming the rock over the lake
Yes,
here with you
yes,
this morning.
Yes, but you're doing a great job, and that's what because people need to understand, you are hosting these seminars throughout the entire Northeast
East
region
Central,
here.
yeah.
And so they can look on your website for that. They can call the office for sure.
Right.
And just make an appointment and to come on down, and they can answer any questions they might have. That we just, like as you mentioned, we've just sort of skimmed over the surface of this thing. But you want to make sure that you are prepared, because we are living longer lives, and because of that, we got to make sure what you have, that you can protect it and still utilize money that may be for you from a federal agency, if you will. So we'll be right back. Well, no, we won't. That's it. I just realized time is up. We've got to go. We'll see you back next week with more Local Matters. Bye, guys.